Two games released in tandem, sharing a fate and most of a name. That must mean there's a new Pokemon game out. And we're going to have a look at the reviews. Let's go. Pokemon is a phenomenon. It spawned 24 films, more than 1,000 episodes of a cartoon that was on when I was still in school. 43 billion trading cards sold and more than 100 video games. Last time I was in Japan, I went to the top floor of a department store and it was packed. And the entire floor was dedicated to Pokemon. And then 3 blocks over, I went to another department store and the exact same thing was happening. Another entire floor dedicated to Pokemon, and it was absolutely packed. It's incredible how much people love Pokemon. It is a cultural event. And so it's a little bit similar to Call of Duty in that reviews kind of don't matter for the biggest fans. They don't really care all that much. They're gonna get their Pokemon one way or the other. You know, like with whether I like it or you like it or any critic likes it, they're gonna get their Pokemon. That's just how it goes. They're in it. And so yeah, we're kind of in a little bit of an interesting place because, well, like Call of Duty, the reviews for Pokemon games keep getting worse. This one's no different. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet out this week, and yeah, it's the lowest scoring Pokemon main series Pokemon game since Pokemon Emerald, with a 77 average on Metacritic from 44 reviews. It's got a 76 on OpenCritic, where they don't do weighted adjustments to their review balancing. And yeah, that's interesting. I think I said last week that I expected a lot of 10s. There was only one. Anyway, we're going to return to our usual scoring system with the high scores first, and we'll end on the low scores. Like I said, there was only one 10, and that score was from a Brazilian site, The Enemy. As always, I'm not going to attempt to get to the bottom of their analysis because I feel like the translation app might, take them out of context on some things. I didn't want to do that to them, so we will skip straight past that. Let's take a look at the high scores from what we could review in these reviews. Okay, the highest score that we're going to take into account, it's a 9 out of 10. There were a bunch of 9s, but actually ScreenRant was the only one in English language. We were going to do from a spread between 8 and 10 anyway, based on anything above 8 would be ranked as a high score. Anything from 8 down to 75 or 7.5 would be a mid score, and anything below that was our low scores for this range, just because of how the reviews were distributed. But anyway, what we've got here is from ScreenRant. Cody Gravelle gave it a 4.5 out of 5 in their rating system. Let's have a look at their pull quote. Pokemon's Scarlet and Violet is a must-play adventure for everyone, even for those who have yet to take the first step on their own Pokemon journey. I guess Cody's trying to say that, even new players should try Scarlet and Violet. That's a good point, I think. If you consider that Pokemon is a game for children, then it's important to frame it in a manner that provides, usable advice in a conclusion paragraph. I don't think a review needs to be consumer advice or anything like that. I think it couldn't be critical analysis all the way through, but I think it's very good when a review can provide some sort of indication on whether you should buy it or not, in relation to the primary audience. And as I already mentioned, Pokemon fans are probably the ultimate primary audience for this one. But newcomers, new kids getting into Pokemon for the first time, they've certainly got to be considered. And let's just clarify ahead of time that when I say a game is for kids, adults are allowed to like things that are for kids, and it's not an indictment of the adult for liking something that's for children. Just because something is for kids doesn't mean adults can't enjoy them. For a long time, people said video games were for kids, and adults still like them. Just know who you are, believe in yourself, and you can play all the Pokemon games you like. Don't let me talk you out of it or anything like that. Don't let anyone talk you out of it. It's ridiculous. Anyway, I think that reads like a 9 out of 10 conclusion to me. Let's have a look at a paragraph from their review. In spite of its flaws, however, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is incredibly hard to put down. The franchise's core concept is intact and as good as it's ever been, and the additional journeys are fun enough that their failings fall by the wayside in practice. New Pokemon Scarlet and Violet designs for the actual Pokemon themselves are either cool or goofy in the best ways, and the type combinations combined with terrestrializing makes for some interesting possibilities. Terrestrialized Pokemon gain bonuses to their damage based on their Terra type, but some Terra types are totally different from the Pokemon's base type, which opens up a huge range of team compositions and makes up for some of the weaknesses of usually fragile Pokemon. An astounding soundtrack filled with some of the series' best musical compilations helps make battles and moments noteworthy, and late-game environments and skirmishes take on a weighty, dynamic feel. This should have been like a couple of paragraphs, really. There should have been a paragraph for whatever terrestrializing is. I didn't really get it based on this review. There is a link in this paragraph, this very long paragraph, to more details, but I couldn't decipher it from this review alone. I think terrestrializing could have been its own paragraph, maybe explain in a little bit more detail. I think I get an idea of what it's supposed to be, but I don't super understand it. I don't know what the soundtrack is doing here. But I think this paragraph really sells the 9, because I think the rest of it was a little bit more negative, but Cody does a good job here of turning it around and really underlining what they loved about this game, what made it a 9, and I think that does a good job. Maybe a little bit light on the analysis, and I think this paragraph sort of shows that as well. There's a lot of ideas that they want to get out, and they don't really spend as much time as I think they might have or could have on any single one of those ideas. They're very quickly moving on to the next one. It's probably the only thing I'd like to see better from another review. But otherwise, yeah, I think they do a good job of selling the 9 here. Let's move on to our next one. Is from Glitched Africa. Marco Cocomello also gave it a 9 out of 10. The pull quote: "Some ideas might not work, and there are some obvious visual issues to overcome, but there's never been a grander, more exciting Pokemon adventure." I don't know if this is a 9 necessarily. I like the idea of the grandiosity, and I think if they can sell that in the review text itself, then I think it will work. But beyond that, this sentence, I don't know, it's got me intrigued to find out more. Let's have a look at a paragraph from the review. There's a certain magic about a Pokemon game when you see a new species for the first time and can't wait to throw that ball at it. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet make this experience even more joyful thanks to its real-scale Pokemon and the various species scattered around the world. I'd often be sprinting across the field only to bump into a minuscule Pokemon that I barely saw creeping through the grass. I would often have to rotate my camera right down to the ground to catch a glimpse of these adorable creatures. The same thing can be said about the ginormous ones that walk about in the distance. I mean, yes, that definitely sells the 9. Absolutely. You know, that does a better job than that single sentence. Although I'm a little bit confused about the ginormous ones. It sort of reads like you have to put the camera low to the ground to see the ginormous ones, but I assume that's not the case. But perhaps it was supposed to link to earlier in the paragraph. I don't know. I must be reading that one wrong. I think it's a very 90 review. I think Marco does a pretty good job of explaining why it got a 9, although they do list a number of problems they had with the game. They managed to tie it all back in a similar way to, I think, Cody from ScreenRant, to a general enthusiasm for the grand scale of this Pokemon game that they really appreciated. I think they're Pokemon fans and they're happy to see Pokemon, a main series Pokemon game, go open world. And yeah, I think it taps into something that, you know, a lot of kids growing up with Pokemon always wanted to see, you know, the ability to go anywhere and do anything. And I think it worked for Marco and it worked for Cody. Let's have a look when we go to the medium scores, the middle scores, see if it worked for anyone else. All right, the first cab off the rank, I got to stop saying that phrase, is Press Start, with a review from Harry Kalogirou with 7.5 out of 10 for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. And let's take a look. I'm sorry if I butchered your last name, Harry. I do my best with these. I know how it feels when someone says your name wrong. Believe me, I know. But let's have a look at their conclusive paragraph, shall we? While there's still many stumbling missteps as Game Freak try to find their footing in the future of Pokemon, Scarlet and Violet is an endearing and enjoyable attempt at a fundamentally different Pokemon experience. New ideas, some quality of life improvements, and some excellent new Pokemon designs make the trip to Paldea worthwhile. This a near perfect conclusive paragraph. I think it is, you know, it sort of wraps everything up in a neat little bow. It's the equivalent of the ending to a very special episode type thing. You know, this is what we learned along the way, in case any of our viewers missed it. You know, I think, yeah, I get 7.5 out of this. Stumbling missteps, endearing, yeah, quality of life improvements. It makes sense. Let's have a look at a paragraph from the review. One area Pokemon has consistently underdelivered in since Sword and Shield, bar remakes, is in their presentation, visual fidelity, and performance. Unfortunately, Scarlet and Violet don't entirely buck the trend, despite some small improvements. For starters, interior environments are vastly improved, and character models in general are more detailed and eye-catching. Environments are only marginally better than what was offered in previous entries, and the performance simply isn't consistent enough to justify it, with regular slowdown and frame drops interrupting the experience. While there's no doubt that the Switch is aging hardware, it's painful to see Pokemon struggle with this yet again, while other titles manage to achieve much more with the same specs. I really liked how Harry lays it in on how other developers do more with the Switch hardware, because I think often, criticism for Switch games can be sort of offset onto the fact that the Switch is, it's an old console. It was never the most powerful to begin with, but, we have seen games do quite a lot with the Switch. Breath of the Wild had spotty performance in areas, but nothing as bad as what Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is putting out. So, I think it's a really good thing to highlight, and I think Harry did a good job with that. There was some assumed knowledge inside of this review that I couldn't get a grasp on. There's some talk of terastallizing that I don't think is explained very well. I guess in a similar way to what Cody got to the heart of, Harry, or didn't get to the heart of, rather. Harry also blasts straight through what terastallizing really means. And I get the feeling, and this is one of those things that happens in reviews, especially when you're a huge fan of something, and I've been guilty of it before, and I have to, directly check myself to make sure I'm not doing it, and even then, it still happens. Assumed knowledge is the idea that everyone knows what you're talking. Everyone is up to date on these things as much as you are, right? So a Pokemon fan will have been watching every Nintendo Direct, every Pokemon Direct to find out what's new in this new Pokemon and all of that kind of stuff. But someone who doesn't care all that much and just dips their toe in every time a new Pokemon main series game comes out, or someone who's brand new to the Pokemon world, they're not going to have any idea what terastallizing is. And I don't even know if I'm saying it right. I'm taking a pretty big swing at it. But they're not going to have any clue. And I think it's one of those areas where you really need to watch out. But outside of that, I thought this is a really good review. There's a lot of depth to it. There's a lot of good analysis in it. And all of it is sort of self-justified. It works for the score, the conclusion works for the score, the conclusion works for the review, and the review works for the score. And it all marries up quite nicely. So I think it was a pretty good job. Let's take a look at ShackNews. Donovan Erskine gave it a 7 out of 10. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet have some excellent ideas that push the franchise in a fresh direction, but they're unfortunately bogged down by unacceptable performance problems at every single turn. While my biggest problems with the games could theoretically be addressed in future patches, I'm not sure how feasible that is given the capabilities of the Switch's hardware. That said, there is still a lot to enjoy, but it's hard imagining that these games will have wide appeal outside of the dedicated Pokemon fans that are willing to put up with the issues and inconvenience. That does not read like something that should exist in a 7 out of 10 review, because that's not an average experience. Even if we, generously adhere to the American standard of a 7 being an average, that is rough. That is a rough conclusive paragraph. There's actually, I liked it though. I mean, as always, I don't care about the score, but I got a lot out of this paragraph, so it worked from that point of view. I just don't think it belongs attached to that score. interesting to have this one juxtaposed against Harry's, where Donovan sort of theorizes in the future that patches might be able to fix some of these problems, and is skeptical because of the hardware. I wonder how Harry would feel about the idea of patches fixing it. It's I don't know. It's an interesting one. Let's take a look at a paragraph from their review. Players are encouraged to bond with their Pokemon by throwing picnics, another new mechanic in Scarlet and Violet. Picnics can be initiated from the menu just about anywhere on the map, outside of towns and crowded areas. Your full party is released from their Pokeballs, and you can interact with them, wash them, and even prepare food. While making sandwiches seemed like a silly addition at first, I dug how it provided a bevy of boosts for me and my Pokemon, improving processes like breeding, training, and even shiny hunting. I chose this paragraph because it's probably the only one I can directly remember mentioning breeding in one of the reviews, and I just think it's hilarious that this game for kids spends so much time and effort on improving and focusing on how much you make these animals bone for your own weird purposes. So, yeah, I don't know. I included it for that reason, but it is actually a pretty good paragraph in terms of, I don't think anyone else mentioned picnics. And they seem like a pretty cool idea, a cool addition. It's not often that you get to see all of your Pokemon all at once. It's often just sort of via a menu or something like that. So it sounds like a cool idea. Surprised to not see more of it. I thought this, review overall sort of continued the trend started in the conclusion paragraph, in that it didn't read very much like a 7. It read lower than a 7 to me, but as always, scores don't mean anything. They mean different things to different people. They mean nothing to me. They might mean one thing to Donovan and a different thing to Donovan's editor and a different thing to the site manager of ShackNews altogether. So, they're all over the place. Hard to nail down. So don't put too much stock in them. Just read the review instead. And I thought this was a good review, very comprehensive in its analysis. So it's worth actually reading. Go and give it. And as always, they don't get any money if you don't click the link, right? The classic. Anyway, let's take a look at the unscored reviews. Okay, you know how we do it already. We randomly select reviews from a range of reviews, I guess, and we randomly landed on Eurogamer's review for our unscored selection this week. Lottie Lynn wrote the review, and here's their closing sentence, I suppose. An interesting reworking of the traditional Pokemon gameplay for an open world setting brought low by its lifeless environments and graphics. Very effective single sentence in that it's very clearly summarizes that Lottie wasn't a huge fan of how this one turned out, I guess. I don't think we can anticipate a very positive review. Let's take a look. The populace of Paldea haven't fared much better, while the towns do feel full of people, with NPCs wandering down the roads or sitting on a bench with their Pokemon. Barely any have something to say. Those who can talk are divided into 2 categories. White chat boxes, where the speaker only has surface level dialogue, and golden chat boxes, which means the character offers some kind of feature, be it a trade or a useful item. While this differentiation does save time, it's a disappointing realization that I've gone from heavily exploring a town, chatting with every local in hopes of uncovering their secrets, to ignoring anyone who hasn't been gilded with gold. there's so much casual information just sort of peppered into this paragraph, and it's all throughout the review. Like the analysis of this review is always also weaving a very rich informational tapestry for you. You're learning a lot. I would say I know what terrestrialization is now. I have a fairly decent understanding of the concept as a result of this review. They went into a lot of detail about almost everything. But yeah, it's a negative review. It absolutely pans out that way. I think Lottie did a fantastic job though, and ironically, I don't know if this was their intention or not. I don't usually write reviews trying to get people to stay away from a game, but some people do. I can't imagine that Lottie was attempting to do that, but it is a negative review that ironically has made me quite interested to check out some of the stuff that they spoke about in it. So I don't know. That's a bit of an interesting turnabout, I thought. Anyway, great review, fantastic stuff. Probably my favorite of the pick, of the list, of the bunch. Let's go with bunch. Anyway, we're moving on now to the low scores. All right, our low scores actually wound up picking the lowest of the low, 2 6s, or both. They're actually 3 out of 5s. But the first one we've got is from the Telegraph UK. It's Jack Rear, and they write, Pokemon's first fully open world title has a lot of ideas, but never quite manages to stick the landing with any of them. The last 3 words there, any of them, that is a damning indictment of this game, I think, from Jack's point of view. There's a tendency for game reviews to reward trying something new and different, but I am firmly of the philosophy that trying and failing is still failing, and it seems like Jack, I don't want to put words in Jack's mouth, but it feels like Jack might subscribe to the same philosophy. Let's take a squiz at a paragraph from their review. The openness often feels like aimlessness. Just go anywhere, do whatever you want, says the game, but it punishes players for not following the route that it has laid down. Frequently, I'd find myself having no idea where to go, not strong enough to tackle the obvious next step, but baffled where to go instead. That's the eternal challenge in an open world game, but it's very interesting to hear that a Pokemon game is succumbing to this, because Pokemon games, in my experience, and I've played a lot of them, tend to err on the side of caution when it comes to hand-holding players. I can't count how many times I have torn my non-existent hair out wishing that a Pokemon game would just let me go and do things, as opposed to leading me by the nose to the next thing that I'm supposed to go to. So it's interesting to hear that Scarlet and Violet actually fail to correctly or accurately signpost a player to direct them to where they go next. I did actually get a sense of this from other reviews as well, from reviews above this one. So it isn't just Jack who wasn't able to pick up on some signs based on the other reviews I read. It seems to be a bit of a recurring theme with Scarlet and Violet. So interesting stuff. I think it's an incisive review. It reads like a 6. I think Jack did a good job. I would have read more. It could have been longer, maybe gone into some of the points a little bit deeper. But at the same time, I really like reading reviews. So I always want more. Right? I'm really enjoying this bowl of spaghetti. I could have done with more spaghetti, but I don't know. You get the serving that you get, right? I just stop complaining about it. In particular, I notice I complain about that specific thing. I wish it was longer. A little bit too much. Anyway, moving on. Our next review is from GamesRadar Plus. Joel Franey, another 3 out of 5 or 6 out of 10. The basic mechanics of Pokemon remain largely untouched. It's still catching, battling, and training as you remember it. And while that may be enough for many devotees, Generation 9 is a tougher sell for those who need more of a reason to engage with the series, impacted as it is by technical issues, mechanical oversights, and a lack of vision. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet should have been a bright and bold entry that sets the series up for future expansion, but an attempt to modernize while staying loyal to the past hasn't really succeeded in doing either one, and the headache doesn't help to boot. The headache, I had to go look this up in the review itself. My initial reaction was that this conclusive paragraph doesn't read like it should exist on a 6, but I had to go look into the review itself to work out what the headache thing was about. This game gave Joel headaches, so I don't know. I don't know how that would earn a 6 if a game gave me a headache. I remember there was a kayaking VR game that's the only VR game to ever make me want to puke after about 5 minutes. Eventually, most VR games give me motion sickness enough to need to, decompress. But this kayaking game, I can't remember what it's called. It made me want to hurl after 5 minutes, and it was the oddest thing because I didn't think it was doing anything in particular that was off. But wow, Anyway, I did not review it because I couldn't get through it. But if I had, makes me want to hurl would have been a strong negative, I think. So giving Joel a headache, it would be a tough one to come back from. If you read the review, and I'm sure you will after you finish listening to this video or watching this video, at least you'll go click on the link, right? Anyway, you'll find out that it was the performance of the game that gave him the headache. So, definitely shouldn't. No, it doesn't read like a 6. Anyway, let's take a look at a paragraph from it. Not the paragraph involving the headache, I'm afraid. I found a more interesting one. Yeah, let's address the copperage in the mart. Pokemon Scarlet is rough, both in terms of its performance and visual fidelity. Crashes forced me to restart, lag and slowdown was frequent, pop-in was a constant bugbear, the loading times were testing, textures looked unimpressive up close, sprites don't appear until you're practically standing on them, and the game cuts frames of animation on anything that's too tough for the hardware, like a single slowly turning windmill or several people sitting calmly in a classroom. In a world where a 7 is average, in the US metric of 7 being average, this review reads like a 4. This review is negative, quite negative. There are definitely some things that Joel enjoyed, and I think they do a good job of attempting to justify that, overall the experience that they had wasn't, the worst thing to ever happen to video games or anything like that. And there were things that he liked, but on my scale, where 5 is the average, good God, that paragraph would only exist in a 3 out of 10. That is a giant list of stuff to have a problem with. I didn't even grab this paragraph because it was so harsh, though. I grabbed it for the elephant in the room gag at the start. It's like it's actually a really good joke. Like Copperajah is like a elephant Pokemon. Mart, it's the Mart part that gets me, right? Because like you can't just say room. You can't just like, but by not saying room, they force the analogy, they force the gag just a little bit further. And it would have been just like, ah, yeah, right, the elephant Pokemon. It's actually amusing me quite a bit because it's so forced as to actually be funny. I enjoyed it. The review itself, yeah, completely divorced from the score, and it's a good review. It's actually, there's a lot to it, and Joel goes into quite a bit of detail. They clearly have a passion for Pokemon, and they're doing a good job of holding the series to account in this review. Yeah, the score just doesn't work on the end of it. But that's not on Joel. That's not on any of that. So, yeah. Let's have a look at, well, I guess we move on to the conclusion. Have I been talking up my conclusion transitions before? I think I only added conclusion transitions last episode. So, anyway. Bayonetta 3 showed us just 3 weeks ago that the Nintendo Switch is still very capable hardware, even in a world where 40 series graphics cards are too expensive and blowing our tits off with their graphics, and CPUs are quickly ushering in the AI singularity. The Nintendo Switch is capable of putting together some really impressive stuff. So I think these reviews all tend to tell us that Pokemon Scarlet and Violet have no real excuse to run as poorly as it does. Features like terastallizing, which allows Pokemon to change their types mid-fight and gain extra moves or different moves. I think they add a layer of complexity to battles that doesn't seem to come into play all that much in the main story, but will widen how competitive players approach everything quite a bit. So I think hardcore Pokemon fans will get a lot out of this game, but they weren't going to care about reviews anyway, right? So for the average punter, Violet and Scarlet poses a fairly easy question. Does the immersive nature of an open world Pokemon game sound good enough to overcome the technical limitations of the game itself? It's different for every person, and it's difficult to say, but overall, it seems like compared to other Pokemon games, compared to other Switch games, probably not. Nevertheless, it does seem like an intriguing game, and Pokemon fans might find themselves jumping in anyway. As some reviews pointed out, there is the chance that performance patches will come in over time to improve the massive frame drops and subpar texture loading, but we'll have to wait and see. Anyway, that's all I've got for you this week. Thanks for joining me on another episode of Reviews in Review. Make sure you read all of the reviews that I listed below. They're in the more info below, so you can check them out there. Head to thegapodcast.com to check out my podcast, where you can hear me talking about other games, probably not Pokemon. I am intrigued, but I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to get into it. I know I'm expecting 3+ hours of tutorialing. I just can't do it. I just don't have it in me. And yeah, I thought of a catchphrase. Remember, there are no bad reviews. There are just negative reviews. I think that's a good catchphrase. I certainly don't write bad reviews. I write great reviews. It's just that sometimes they're negative. Anyway, stay safe. I'll catch you next time. Love you. Bye.